The government, after delivering that budget earlier in the week, find themselves under more fire this morning as there are accusations again that another manifesto promise has been broken. Let's get the views now of the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, who I'm very pleased to say is here with us in the studio. Secretary of State, thanks so much for being with us. We'll start with the Workers' Rights Bill then. It's been watered down, hasn't it, that you've removed this right for people to not be unfairly dismissed on day one of being in a job?
So the Employment Rights Bill is the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. There has been discussion on the point around unfair dismissal in the time period between businesses, the TUC and government. And following that discussion, there's been agreement about the way forward, which is welcome. Mm-hmm. It means that the time limit will come down from 2 years to 6 months, and that runs alongside important day one rights around sick pay and around parental leave. But the risk here was that if we didn't make progress, those important rights wouldn't come into force from April next year. We want to deliver that upgrade to make sure that more workers are protected. This will benefit millions of people across our country. But there was the very real prospect that unless that discussion had taken place and a pragmatic approach was reached, that there'd be a year's delay to that implementation, which we didn't want to see.
So saying it's pragmatic, is it a broken promise?
No, in the manifesto, what we said was that we would work with trade unions, with business, with civil society, in consulting on those protections that we'd be bringing forward. So there are both parts to that within the manifesto, the important rights and the consultation. We've done that. This is going to represent a huge change and massive improvement to workers across our country, but that will only happen if we secure the bill, if we get the legislation through, and what we've managed to agree will mean that from April next year, we hope that those will now be enforced.
The paternity rights stay, of course, the sick pay on day one stays as well. But this was, of course, led by a former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. If she was still around, would this have been watered down in this way?
Look, that's a hypothetical. I mean, she cares very deeply about this, as do I.
Have you spoken to her since this has come out?
No, I haven't spoken to her. I mean, she cares very deeply about this, as do I, as do all Labour MPs. This is a central commitment in our manifesto, which we are delivering because we're making sure that we're getting the legislation through. These will mean important protections from day one in many areas, alongside wider changes that will help millions of workers, and it's incredibly important. So
she's going to take the criticism then that it's another broken promise. You're happy with that as a criticism, or are you rejecting that as a criticism?
Look, sometimes you have to be pragmatic. And
we want that word. Okay.
Yeah, but that's life. Sometimes you do have to adopt some pragmatism if you want to make sure that you get the wider package through. And that's the approach that you've seen from trade unions as well, who've been involved in this conversation. OK.
I want to speak to you about special education needs and disability provisions in schools. We found out in the budget that money that is spent by councils to provide that provision for kids is going to now be spent by central government. The OBR have said that there is a shortfall in the amount of money. Some £6 billion is going to have to be found. I know that you say that they are wrong in their figures. Can you explain to us why the OBR are wrong, first of all, in their figures?
No, I can, and I will directly, but I just want to stress right at the top that support for children with SEND, making sure we've got a much better system, is what is driving everything this government is doing. There are those deficits that have been inherited. They've been building up over a long period of time, council deficits, that the OBR for the first time are now including on the government balance sheet. What the OBR set out in their document was what that would look like if it were to be dealt with entirely within the Department for Education's budget through school budgets. We've been clear, and the Treasury were clear in the document that ran alongside the budget, that this is a question for the whole of government, not simply for the Department for Education or for the schools budget. So the OBR set out a hypothetical scenario that's not going to happen, that isn't government policy, and actually this year and every year we're investing in more support for children with SEND. But we do want to bring down some of those higher costs where, for example, children with SEND have to travel very, very long distances far from home and not able to access a brilliant education at their local school. And what we're doing right now is creating more provision for children closer to home who have additional needs so they get the education and outcomes they deserve.
You sound a bit frustrated with the OBR. You're not the first government minister this week to be upset with that organisation.
Well, they've set out the position and what that could look like. I'm just being clear that actually that's not the government's position. I do think others, however, have jumped on this bandwagon and are seeking to kind of stoke a rather misleading discussion about what this means. Everything that we're doing around support for children with SEND, the extra investment that's going in, the extra investment that's going into family support services, also the work around child poverty is going to make a huge difference to many families where children have SEND. You know, 500,000 children are going to be lifted out of poverty because of this budget a Labour government has delivered.
Now, councils are still on the hook for this, and as you pointed out in your first answer, they are in debt for providing this SEND provision, some £14 billion. The government's going to take over in 28-29. Up until that point, who's going to cover that money?
So at the moment, there's something in place called the statutory override, which means that that's kind of held for now. What we're doing is working with councils.
Which means that's just sitting there waiting to be taken care of?
It's sitting there. This is something that's built up over many, many years. But what we're doing in the here and now with councils is working with them to create more provision, better provision closer to home. So I've seen some amazing work that's gone on in many local areas where you have schools that now have mainstream schools that have created specialist provision, specialist units, resource bases, people tend to call them, within schools, where children who have special needs can access that support and a brilliant education without having to travel very, very far. So those are the kinds of ways that you can deliver a better system in terms of outcomes, but how you make it more sustainable for councils. But I do have to just be really, really clear that the money isn't the starting point, not some arbitrary number. The starting point is how we make sure children with SEND get a brilliant education. And at the moment, the system just isn't working.
Secretary, they will hear you saying that as well, but viewers will also realise that money is super tight at the moment and money has had to be moved around. So you're saying it's not going to come from the education budget, but it has to come from somewhere. £6 billion is not nothing. So which departments are going to suffer to make sure this provision is there?
So this is years into the future. It's into the next spending review in 2028. And so we're meant to wait and see, yeah?
Well, trust you with it.
Well, this is being held for now. It's why we are going to bring forward reforms next year to make the system better for children, but also to make it a system that just works overall. Clearly, what we've had in the last decade or so hasn't worked on many, many levels. The parents I speak to tell me that, they wait too long for support, it's too adversarial. That's why at the moment we're spending a lot of time speaking with parents, with campaigners, with disability rights groups and others to design with them a system that's going to work better in the long run.
And you'll forgive them for not having loads of trust in you, won't you, for the way that you've changed your position on certain things, you've found money from other places, you've cut other budgets as well. There will be concern among this group and the rest of the people who have kids in schools that there will be a cut to educational standards because of this decision.
I would say to parents, judge us on what we've done so far where it comes to schools and education, whether that's lifting 500,000 children out of poverty, new free breakfast clubs, expanding free school meals, a huge expansion in childcare, and extra investment every year in school budgets. Those are about priorities. That's about the priorities of this Labour government, and that's what we'll keep doing going forward.
OK, Secretary of State, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you.